Hey, good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order the October 25th, 2023 City of Asheville Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. I'm Jack Eigelman and I'm the chair of the group. Our meetings continue to be held virtually, but there are many ways for interested parties to participate in this gathering. The City of Asheville's engagement hub, which includes a variety of links and phone numbers, can be found on the Multimodal Transportation Commission page of the City of Asheville's website. Visiting the page is the best way to take part in our virtual meetings. Members, staff, and guests, remember to keep your microphones muted at all times when you're not speaking, so we don't hear dogs barking and can minimize feedback and other background noises. I'd like now to welcome our commission members. Members, when I call your name, please introduce yourself and let us know what interests you represent. We'll start out with Kenny Armstrong.
Hey, Kenny here. I'm an at-large member of the Multimodal Transportation Commission, recently departed from the Greenway Committee, and I walk my kids to school and I walk to work every day.
Thanks, Kenny. Joseph Barker.
Hey, Joseph Barker here. I am also an at-large member of the committee. I live in West Asheville and I am a traffic engineer by day.
Joseph Chesler.
Yes, good afternoon, Joe Chesler, resident of West Asheville. I'm a retired planner and represent the Transit Committee and bicycle interests.
Thanks, Joe. Leanna Joyner.
Hi, I'm Leanna Joyner. I represent the Active Transportation Committee, which is the citizen advisory group focused on increasing the availability of infrastructure for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other wheeled human transportation, whether skateboards, strollers, or wheelchairs. The committee emphasizes the imperative for connected ways of travel that place an emphasis on human dignity and safety. My day job's with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and I also live in West Asheville.
Bill Loftus.
Hey, Bill Loftus here, and I represent the Transit Committee.
Elise Smarter.
Hi, I'm Elise Smarter. I'm also an at-large member residing in West Asheville, and I'm a walker, roller skater, and transit enthusiast.
Randy Warren.
Hi, Randy Warren, and I'm an at-large rep now, and I live in South Asheville, and I'm an avid bicyclist and a longtime bicycle advocate, avid walker as well, and occasional transit user.
Mike Zukoski.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm a retired civil engineer. I don't represent any specific groups. I guess I'm an at-large member. Easy for you to say.
Thanks, everyone, for the introduction. I'd also like to welcome our non-voting commission members, Elizabeth Likas-Worley.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Likas, and I'm the liaison from the Neighborhood Advisory Committee to the MMTC, and I am a walker and biker.
And I'd like to mention that Joe Archibald has stepped off from his role with the Planning and Zoning Commission, but definitely want to thank Joe for his great work and participation in the work that we do. I'd now like to welcome some guests that we're having here at the meeting. I believe Jared Wheatley is with us, who is a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission to check things out. Is that right, Blake? Jared, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm Jared Wheatley, a citizen here in downtown Asheville, downtown resident. I also have two kids who live downtown with me. Pedestrian traffic, sidewalks, bike lanes, all of that are very important to us as a family. And now I sit on the Planning and Zoning Commission and I'm kind of functioning as a pseudo liaison today.
Well, it's nice to have you, Jared. And I'd like to welcome our City Council liaison member, Maggie Ullman.
Hey everybody, it's me. Nice to see you. There's some new faces, and I'm really glad to have you all joining. It's really fulfilling to be part of these type of committees. I was on this committee as a citizen before I got elected to council, so this one has a special place in my heart. I'm glad to continue serving and participating as the council liaison.
Thanks, Maggie. And I'd like to also welcome our city employees, Jessica Morris, and I believe Anna Sexton is presenting later on in our agenda. So welcome to Anna.
Hello.
Our first agenda item is to review and approve the agenda. Are there any suggestions or changes? If not, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Leanna. And a second.
I'll second. Mike.
Okay. Committee members, when I say your name, please say aye or nay. We'll take a vote. And Kenny?
Aye.
Joseph Barker?
Aye.
Joe Chesler?
Yes.
Leanna?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And that motion carries. The agenda is approved. Our last meeting was September 27th. Are there any suggestions or changes to the minutes? Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, let me pull it up here. In recommendations to NCDOT regarding bicycle facilities, it says there towards the bottom, complete streets policy, and have these experts use NCDOT, and it's written and MBCT. It should be MUTCD. So it's a manual for uniform traffic control devices, MUTCD, instead of MBCT.
Thanks, Randy. Any other changes before we motion to approve? Not, I'll ask for a motion from the floor to approve the minutes from September 27th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with Randy's correction.
Thanks, Elise. In a second.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Joe Chesler. And we'll now take a vote. Kenny?
Aye.
Joseph Barker?
Aye.
The other Joe Chesler?
Aye.
And Leanna?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and the motion carries, and the minutes are approved. I don't think we have any public comments. Is that correct, Jessica?
I think so. Nicole, have we
okay.
gotten anything? Guessing not.
No, ma'am. No public comments received.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have a number of announcements that we'll try and move through. There are two listed on the agenda. I have some additional ones. So we'll start with the college patent complete streets project approval.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know, if you didn't already know, that the College Patent Complete Streets project, formerly we were just referring to it as a bike lane project, but it really is more than that. That has been approved by City Council at their October meeting. And we are, going to take the next steps with that project, which is to put together bid documents for it and issue a bid document, which hopefully then we'll get some bids from contractors for the installation of that project. And so tentatively, what we're looking at is bringing, hopefully we'll get bids and we'll be able to select somebody to do it, and we'll bring that contract back to council for authorization to execute it, hopefully January, February. And then after it, we've selected a contractor, we'll work with them to figure out when the installation will take place and how that will take place. Hopefully my goal would be summer at the latest, hopefully earlier than that for installation. So we'll keep you guys updated on that, but just, you know, getting to this point, it's been quite a long haul. So thank you guys.
Yeah, now just because it is such a big issue, does anyone have any questions for Jessica before we move to the next announcement? Randy.
Not a question, but I just want to commend Jessica and the staff for all the hard work they've done on this. It was a much longer process to get to this point than we initially anticipated. And I know it was very trying and challenging and took a lot of perseverance and dedicated staff time and energy towards this. And Jessica continued to present a very logical and well thought out argument towards this project and didn't get rattled when people tried to rattle her a lot. And I just said, you know, I just want to make sure that we publicly recognize Jessica and her staff for doing a really good job with this.
Thanks, Randy. Elizabeth.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to second that I think that there's so much work that has gone into this, and I'm really glad that we're moving forward in that area. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge the controversy raised by the legacy neighborhoods and the BIPOC community. I thought it noteworthy that in the vote, it was a 4-3 vote, and the 3 councilwomen of color were the ones, I think, who voted no for that. And we spent a lot of time last MMTC meeting talking about continuing communication with those communities. I would just like to put in another plug and request that we continue in communication in good faith, that we will hear and plan according to a lot of the different pieces that were represented.
Mm-hmm.
Well said, Elizabeth. Thank you, Randy, for the comments, and thanks, Jessica, and your staff for the work on that.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I especially want to thank Anna. She's here, and she was really like the instrumental staff member. There were a lot of staff members that worked on that project, but Anna really, I think it was a lot of labor of love for Anna as well. Well, maybe not love. It was definitely labor, but yeah, we appreciate the appreciation.
Yep.
And one other thing I would like to mention. So I don't know, this is something that we didn't talk about because it did come up kind of at the last minute with regards to approving that project, but there was a late addition to the motion that also directed staff to, I forget the wording exactly, but it was revise ordinances to allow for micro mobility in bike lanes, something to that effect, which, you know, I think we find to be a positive development. What we are now going to work on, and I am hoping to bring something back to the Multimodal Commission in December, is not so much the track changes of ordinance changes, but some discussion points or some recommended policies that we think is sort of part and parcel of making a change like that. So it was narrowly said, you know, multimodal devices or micromobility devices in bike lanes, but what about the rest of the streets? And we don't have bike lanes everywhere, so how does one get to them? Those sorts of bigger questions we need to address as well. And we have some recommendations to bring forward that we think, well, we definitely want you guys to weigh in before we actually start drafting ordinance changes. So look, we'll bring that back to you guys in a couple months.
That looks like good work for us. Next announcement is the Merriman pavement markings discussion update from the last meeting, the bike lanes on Merriman.
Right. And I think, Randy, later in the agenda, we've got a letter that Randy has drafted, and perhaps we can talk about any other updates at that point.
Yeah, that's fair. I do have a few more announcements that I'll go through briefly and ask a couple of folks to contribute. Just a reminder, the Greenway Committee, the Future Active Transportation Committee, meets the first Thursday of every month. So the next meeting is November 2nd, 3 to 5. You can find details. That's a live meeting, and encourage you all to attend if you're able. And the Transit Committee also meets every third Tuesday, which would be November 21st, from 5 to 7 virtually. So keep your eye on that if that meeting happens. I haven't seen confirmation of that yet, and that is around that Thanksgiving week. So Elizabeth, would you give us an update on the Festival of Neighborhoods, how that might impact our work?
Yes, thank you. And I'm also going to have to step out of the meeting early, so I wouldn't be able to give this NAC report at the end as it's listed on the agenda. So thank you for that. Just wanted to let you know we had a very successful, as we've gotten feedback and from a lot of members around the community, Festival of Neighborhoods that was held on the last Saturday in September, on September 30th at MLK Park. The first time that has been held since pre-COVID days, and very different from, I think, what I've heard about the last two that were sort of in the 2018, 2019. We had about 30 different vendors, 10 different neighborhoods that were pretty evenly spaced between nonprofits that were there for information, Read to Succeed, the library, Candace Pickens Park, Asheville on Bikes was there doing set up a little obstacle course for kiddos. We had a lot of kids activities. We didn't really collect data at the gate about how many people were coming and going, but of all the door prize cards, bingo cards that we made, all 500 of them that were printed were gone. So don't know if anybody was able to go to that, but I see a lot of opportunity in the future for neighbors wanting to know about the transportation issues, the traffic, the walking, the greenways through their neighborhoods. And I see a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. We will start in January to plan the next one. And so would encourage everybody to be on the lookout for opportunities to be a part of that. And the kind of a just real quick general update on NAC, we had the best attended and most vibrant, how would you say, meeting of NAC the other night about the flag lots and the cottage cluster amendments that were going into the UDO. And it was really interesting that had a big showing at the city council meeting last night, and city staff had admitted they were, even though those that are on planning and zoning, I know they have a liaison here too, generally, that they're going to commit to a lot more public and neighborhood engagement in those things when there's a development that might affect those neighborhoods. So just as far as NAC goes, I think there's I would love at some point for someone from MMTC to go to a NAC meeting to talk about all the ways that neighborhoods could benefit from what we're doing in this committee.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Elizabeth. I think there's huge opportunities for us to understand the impact of our work on the neighborhood level. So thanks for your work on that and sharing.
And Maggie's writing in that the police, there were a lot of city departments at the Festival of Neighborhoods. I did see at least 3 city council people there, and they had the gun that you can run to see how fast you go, like the speed guns. I saw several city staff out there trying to beat each other's times. So,
and for the record, Maggie Ullman was 14 miles per hour. So
I wasn't 14. That's what I saw. I will not say what I was. But if it was on a bike, I would have been much faster. It was quite slow.
Someone did have 16. That was the record posted.
Joe, would you give us a brief update on the Patton Avenue corridor and feasibility study?
Yes, thanks, Jack. Yeah, I didn't want to add it to the agenda officially, but just real quickly, we Mike Zukowski and I are your designees for the liaison on the project working group for the downtown Patton Avenue corridor and feasibility study, basically from the Bowen Bridge up to Biltmore Avenue. And we're really excited. We've linked up with Vidalia, what is it, Sadvika, Jessica, is that how she pronounces it? And
he pronounces it Vidila Satvika.
My apologies. You see how much we've connected. In any event, we're really excited. We will be having our first meeting on the 29th of November. So things are beginning to ramp up. The project working group is established, and it's made up of downtown commission members, the Housing Authority representative, Downtown Neighborhood Association, Mountain True, the Downtown Association, Explore Asheville, and various others. So we're just excited to be part of it, to contribute. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you all for volunteering on that, Joe and Mike. Hey, Kenny, would you give us a brief update? I fumbled your email with information, I believe, about the ribbon cutting for the Augusta Trail.
No, you're getting ahead of yourself. It's groundbreaking, not a ribbon cutting.
Groundbreaking, yeah, of course, yeah, duh.
So this Saturday, October 28th at 10 o'clock, there's a groundbreaking ceremony open to the public for the first leg of the Augusta Trail, which there is a 20-mile trail that's going to connect Brevard to Hendersonville. So if anybody's interested, it's at 10 o'clock on Saturday at the Veterans Healing Farm on Yale Road in Henderson County. Should be pretty exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. It's a super cool development. Can't wait for that to happen. And then finally, I've got one more announcement. Elise had what I thought was a very meaningful suggestion, and that is to have just a brief moment of silence for the 5 pedestrians and cyclist fatalities in 2023 in Asheville. And just as a reminder for our work, ultimately what we do is to make our transportation system as safe as possible. So I'd like to read off the names, and following those names, just a brief moment of silence for Jason Perry, Brian Pickens, Ben Brown, Hans Gruber, and Patrick Leroy. All right, folks, we'll move on to new business. And Jessica, I think we need to discuss our November meeting and our December meeting, both dates that may not be great because of the holidays.
Right. So for those of you that have been around a little bit in the past, what we've done is we've had, our meetings typically fall on both on those holiday weeks. And so what we've done is we've usually canceled them both, and then had one joint meeting sometime like the second week of December. I think that one of the things I would like to suggest, and see how you guys feel, but I feel like we have a lot of stuff going on and a lot of things that we would like to talk about, and that's too much for just having one joint one meeting for November and December. So I would like to suggest that we consider continuing to have our November and our December meeting, but moving it to the week prior to the third week, and not necessarily on Wednesday of the third week, but we can work to try to find a day that works for folks, the third week of November and the third week of December. But that's up to you guys. If it's too much and you just want to do one meeting and we do it sometime in early December, we can do that as well. Another option is we have one meeting that's longer. We've done that before too. So it's kind of up to you guys.
Discussion, folks, on whether or not to do 2 meetings, do a November meeting and a December meeting, or 1 long meeting, or 0 meetings. Joseph.
Yeah,
Jessica.
Jack. Yeah, Jessica, or is the transit committee going to meet on the 21st as of now? That's what I have.
Yes.
On my calendar.
Yes, that is the plan. Although Thanksgiving is the 23rd, isn't it? Yeah, we do want to have a transit committee meeting. And so I think our plan would be to have it the 21st.
So I would follow the MMTC, which is not the normal protocol. I'm just wondering if Harvey may be willing to switch as well to the 3rd week. Have you had any discussions with them? Do you know?
No, we have not. We have not had that discussion yet with them. Their group seems a little more difficult to move around, but we could do that, or we could meet with them. Yeah, we can have that conversation with them.
Yeah, either date is fine with me. I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Folks, is there a preference to do 2 meetings, 1 in November and 1 in December, or just aiming for 1 longer meeting? Elise?
I think I would prefer 2 meetings as opposed to just 1.
Okay.
And certainly, I mean, our meetings are already like 2 hours. I wouldn't want to do a longer meeting than that.
Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, I agree. I think 2 meetings is more productive, because meeting fatigue sets in. So if people can make 2 meetings, then I think we can be more productive. And then also too, if we have discussions that start in November that need to be continued in December, it's easier to do that than if we just do 1 meeting with a big gap. So
yeah,
I know Leanna said too, the 3rd week works both for her, but then 2nd week in December, actually that works better for me as well too. So the 3rd week in November and 2nd week of December on Wednesday, if that works for others, that works for me.
Mike? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree that I think that 2 meetings would be appropriate. It looks like we have quite a bit on the schedule, and just to keep from piling up into the new year, I think 2 meetings is appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds, unless anyone objects to that, I think we should do 2 meetings. My suggestion is, Jessica, maybe you and I send out a poll or something like that so we can deal with the logistics of availability and see what settles in, and Joe's suggestion of trying to make sure that, we're not overlapping or getting out of order with other meetings. So maybe we can do that background work and then get back to this group as soon as possible so you can put them on your calendars. But we'll meet. Sounds like there's consent, more or less consent. We don't need to vote on this. Do we need to vote on it to cancel those?
No.
Meetings? Okay.
No, we'll just, we'll notice them publicly once we come up with the date and times.
Okay. I love it. This is a commission that wants to work. Yay. Or maybe there's just a lot of work to be done. All right. We're going to move on. There are no other new business items, so we're going to move to unfinished business. And this is an action item to adopt the updated Multimodal Transportation Commission rules of procedure.
Right. So I was not here for your last meeting, but Lucy presented to you guys a draft of the update to the Multimodal Commission rules of procedure. And part of the rules of procedure say that you can't adopt an update at the same meeting in which you show the draft. So last month was the draft. This month would be us hopefully adopting those updates. And I forgot to write a motion in a suggested motion in the agenda, but essentially it would just be a motion to adopt the new rules of procedure. And I'm happy to go over any questions if anybody has any lingering questions, but we did make some tweaks based on some of the comments that were given at the last meeting, but and we've got the draft document in the agenda as well as the final document.
Questions, comments for discussion? Joe Chesler.
Yeah, Jessica, great tweaking. Appreciate everything that was done. I would move approval as submitted in the final version.
And is that a motion, Joe?
Yes.
Getting that sorted out. Next on the agenda is recommendations to North Carolina Department of Transportation regarding bicycle facilities. And there's a letter of recommendation. And Randy, would you give us an overview?
Certainly. So this is obviously an ongoing issue, and not just confined to Merriman, but I think that Merriman is a good case for us to specifically note what we don't think that NCDOT has done correctly. And I know that a lot of times when we have this discussion too, people always just say, well, in NACTO, it has all these things, or MUTCD has all the signs and stuff too. But the problem with those documents is they do provide a good framework, but it's up to, there's a lot of wiggle room for engineers. And in North Carolina's own complete streets policy, it oftentimes leaves it up to the engineer who's designing the street. And so to put specific requirements, I think for Merriman, or recommendations, is a good idea. And then also to advise for how they should go about it in the future is a way to do it. So this letter specifically states that we want them to put signage, install signage prior to the start and end of the bicycle lanes that indicates the presence of a bicycle lane. And then I noted the specific MUTCD signs that are appropriate for that. And then the next part, because those signs aren't mandated in the complete streets policy or even in the NACTO guide, but because the engineer is supposed to say, oh, it's warranted or not. In this case, they didn't think it was, we think it is. The next part too is, I think I said, install bicycle lane pavement markings immediately after all intersections and at intervals sufficient to clearly distinguish between the bicycle lane and the motor vehicle lane. And even Mayor Mannheim said in the last council meeting that I went to 2 weeks ago, she said it doesn't look like a bike lane a lot of times. And so again, NACTO doesn't say specifically the intervals for bicycle lane markings. They do say the interval for share the road symbols not to be more than, I think, 250 feet, not to be less than 250 feet apart. But there is no, it's left up to the engineers for this. And so right now, there aren't enough symbols to make it apparent that it's a bike lane in a lot of different spots. And then the last one is to differentiate the look of the bicycle lane from the motor vehicle lane through maintaining the width of the striped bicycle lane while filling any excess pavement with buffered striping on one or both sides of the bicycle lane as road widths allow. And I did have a discussion with NCDOT about this issue, and they think having it go wider and narrower is okay. And I think we don't think that, because it doesn't look like a bike lane in many places, because bike lanes don't go as wide as a traffic lane and then go lower. And so if you make it look like a bike lane, people will treat it more like a bike lane. And right now it's not being done that way. And then I did say at the last meeting too, I mentioned about the committee that's required to be involved in complete streets projects. But again, the implementation guide from NCDOT doesn't detail it out as clearly as I think it should be. There is also a sheet they have to fill out, and it says it has to be reviewed by the committee, but in the implementation guide, it says that the committee only reviews exceptions. So it's not very clearly stated. So in this, I just said we strongly encourage planners to develop detailed designs for complete streets treatments in collaboration with the Integrated Mobility Division and reviewed by the Complete Streets Review team. So the Integrated Mobility Division is my understanding is that's the division that includes the bike ped advisory positions in NCDOT. So hopefully they'd be involved in this and do it in an appropriate way. And then the Complete Streets Review team is supposed to review these requests, although again, it's not as clearly stated as it should be. But we recommend it specifically that they should do this to spell it out a little bit more for them. And then I used the Complete Streets policy wording. I said MMTC knows that NCDO is committed to, and this is in their own words, providing an efficient multimodal transportation network in North Carolina such that the access, mobility, and safety needs of motorists, transit users, bicyclists, and pedestrians of all ages and abilities are safely accommodated, and noted exactly where that is in their policy. Because in this case, it does not seem like they're necessarily doing that, and I know it's somewhat of a judgment issue, but this letter is saying, in our judgment, we don't feel like they are, and they should in this instance and in future projects. So this is, doesn't have any necessarily, they don't have to listen to us. This is just us suggesting what we think is appropriate. But I think it's important that in order for this project to be successful, it needs to be done in the best way possible. And we don't feel like they're doing that and want to point it out to them.
Randy, thanks for your work on this and your explanation. Yeah. Discussion. Mike is first in the queue.
Yeah, Randy, my understanding is that was not a Complete Streets project, and that's why they are getting away with not making sure that the sidewalks are ADA accessible. They're saying it was not a Complete Streets project. It was strictly a paving project that changed the striping.
Yeah, thanks for noting that, actually. So I've read the policy several times and the implementation guide several times as we've worked on this Merriman project. And Complete Streets projects do also include repaving projects. So there are street rebuilds, in which they would have to expand the sidewalks and change the road width and things like that. And then there are Complete Streets projects as applied to repaving. And so this fits underneath that aspect of it, repaving. They still need to, as they're changing the street to abide by the repaving aspect of Complete Streets, abide by the policy. So my understanding, at least, is that there's two separate things, the repaving projects and then rebuild projects. But both are governed by Complete Streets.
Okay.
Leanna.
Thanks. Again, Randy, thanks for the letter. And you're right with the use of obscure. I think you were thinking adjective and I was thinking verb when I read it the first time. So thank you for that. My only suggestion is, given Mayor Manheimer's interest in the project and to demonstrate the civic engagement of this group, we might consider a copy to City Council on the letter.
Thanks. I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Elise.
I was also having the same thought that this might have more impact if the mayor and or other council members also supported this and signed their names to it.
If I could jump in, I wonder if, I feel like in my experience when I was on MMTC, some of the most fruitful experiences I had collaborating with DOT were a conversation. And so I wonder if some of the approach is also to try and get a sit down time with DOT to talk through this. And this is also coming from council inboxes that are often getting 100 emails a day, and we work our hardest to work through them. But I feel like this is such a thoughtful reflection that is a lot of work for y'all to do and align around, and then distributing it is also really important. But if there's a way for the committee to have a couple volunteers pursue really getting a sit down with DOT, I think that would also have a lot of impact.
Yeah,
that's Maggie. A good suggestion. Randy, your thoughts?
I think you're exactly right. And I know Maggie and I both worked with NCDOT on this project, and when you sit down and talk to people, it's best. So I think that the formality of a letter like this is important, but the follow-up in terms of hoping that they're getting that conversation. And I do have a little bit of that conversation has started already with them too, and separate from our previous meetings stuff too. So to follow up with a request for a meeting, I think would be a great way to continue to pursue this.
And I think that's where like if I can be helpful to get that meeting, I don't know if staff would want to help liaise getting that meeting, but getting that meeting itself might be tricky just because people can be so busy. But I think that might be a way that I think the electeds might be able to tease in as well. So, if helping make that happen is something I can do, let me know.
Thanks.
Y'all, any other comments or questions? Great letter, Randy. I'm excited that we're keeping the bike lanes on Merriman out in the forefront. Joe Chesler has his hand up.
Yeah, I just don't mean to hold it up, but Randy, are you and Jack, are you proposing that we vote on submitting this letter, or with Maggie's suggestion, hold off for a meeting format to present it? What's the objective? I think it's extremely well worded and thought out, but what do you suggest from here on out?
I think that in order for it to be signed by all of us, we all need to agree that we want to send it to us. So I think a vote would be appropriate in terms of that. And I mean, Maggie or Jack can chime in on this as well too, but I think that we could vote to send the letter now, and we could send it with a request for a meeting so that they have something. So it's a process. They have something physical, they can read it, and then request for a meeting. And then if we don't get any results immediately from that too, then I think that we continue to advocate for a meeting, maybe by using council or staff to help us facilitate that, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a smart approach, adding that into the letter that we'd like a meeting and then pursue it. Leanna Joyner.
Shot at the motion. Because Joe teed it up so beautifully. I would like to propose that we send the letter as written with a copy to our city council. And I think that's it. That's all we would need. And request a meeting as part of the letter submission.
Thanks, Leanna. So a motion to approve this letter to City Council as well, with a request for a meeting from DOT. Is there a second for Leanna's motion?
I'll second, Elise.
Thanks, Elise. And now we'll vote on it. Kenny Armstrong.
Aye.
Joe Barker.
Aye.
And Joe Chesler.
Aye.
Leanna Joyner.
Aye.
Bill Loftus.
Aye.
Elise Martyr.
Aye.
Randy Warren.
Aye.
Mike Zukoski.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and the motion carries. Thanks, Randy, for your work on this. This is great. Yeah, Maggie.
I just have one follow-up question for staff, and agreed, like Randy, this is awesome. I think a really important function that committees play is advocating for what's right, and then holding all of us, council too, accountable to following through, because follow through is where the actual implementation is. So thanks for the keen eye. The question towards Jessica is, do you think DOT will be like, sure, no problem, let's get a meeting? And do you think that staff could help facilitate that? Or do you think a more orchestrated approach that involves council would be best? Do you have advice?
So I think that staff can facilitate getting that meeting. So I will say that after the council meeting, Ms. Ken Putnam did have a conversation, I think, over the phone with Tim Anderson at DOT about some of the concerns that were brought up. And we actually have our normal monthly meeting with them tomorrow. And we were going to talk a little bit more about those concerns. And I don't want to preempt your letter and hand it to them, Randy, unless you want me to, but we were planning to say, the Multimodal Commission also has some concerns and is planning to send a letter. So we were going to give them kind of a heads up tomorrow at that meeting, and we can talk to them about facilitating something with the multimodal. But I would suggest that it not be the whole group, that it's maybe a couple of folks.
Yeah.
So we can get there. I don't think we need you guys, hopefully, the council that is, to step in.
Happy to do it, but that was my gut too. So thanks.
Thank you, folks. Yeah, Anna.
Hi, I saw a message along the bottom of the screen. I don't know if this is the case, but that the meeting maybe stopped recording. So just want to give a heads up to folks in case we need to.
Yeah, Nicole was having some technical difficulties with the YouTube thing that's simultaneously being cast. So she started recording the meeting, and then I'm guessing maybe it came back.
Okay, just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you.
Next agenda item is informational. It's to review the draft Active Transportation Committee Rules of Procedure. The staff will present the draft Rules of Procedure for the Active Transportation Committee, and a final document will be presented at the November MMTC meeting for adoption. Date to be determined.
Right. So this document is set up pretty much the same as the multimodal rules of procedure, and we actually also looked at the Greenway Committee rules of procedure, and essentially have just changed some minor things like the name of Greenway Committee. We're changing it. Well, we're calling this now the Active Transportation Committee. I've made some notes of some other things I wanted to just kind of highlight as additions that I think will be helpful. The first one here, we're noting that you guys approved the updated rules of procedure, which you just did. We are renaming Greenway Committee to Active Transportation Committee. And what we're saying is that it is a subcommittee that will be advising Multimodal Commission on pedestrian, bicycle, greenway, and we added micromobility as sort of a catch-all for new transportation devices. And anybody stop me and jump in if you have any questions. That was one thing I wanted to bring to your attention. These items here under purpose, they are by and large very similar to what was in the Greenway Committee's purpose. And we've made it say active transportation, and we've added the word micromobility in here, and tried to capture all of the different modes that you'll be looking at. Membership, everything in this section is consistent with the Multimodal Commission rules of procedure. So the number of people, how they're appointed, none of that will really change. We have, I highlighted these because this is something I just wanted to note that would be really helpful for staff. It's for when folks are not going to be able to attend, that they provide notice to both the chair and the staff liaison. This one I highlighted because that this is something that's also been very helpful to us and is a new addition, also consistent with the Multimodal Commission rules, but being able, if we can't refill someone's position immediately, then they can stay on longer than their term if they want to. Let's see. Oops, I think my computer just froze. No, there we go. This is all structured the same with the chair, vice chair, and this whole paragraph about staff support is the newest language that is consistent with every other board and commission now, and also the same as the multimodal number of meetings. This is we changed this to 6, which is what we just approved in the multimodal, and I think that's a good thing because that provides more flexibility. We can always have more than 6, and I think that's really it. Everything else in here is exactly as written in the multimodal commission rule. So, are there any questions? Anything I can go over in more detail? And if not, then we will just bring this back for adoption at the next meeting.
I have a couple
Leanna
questions.
is up. Sorry about that. I was muted. Leanna, go ahead.
That's okay. 2 questions. Well, I guess one question first. In the section around what I would think of as like succession planning, but the notion of people staying on beyond a term limit and being qualified. Can you just describe what being qualified means? That's like they've gone through the process and are what does a qualified mean in that setting?
I don't know.
Is that like there's
I never,
like those type of things? Because we have some base qualifications like that.
yeah. That's an interesting, I didn't really think through that word, but that's what we've got, I think, written in other board and commissions. Or successors are appointed and qualified.
I think actually it might be qualified and appointed because they shouldn't be appointed if they aren't qualified. But it would make sense the other way around. If the successors are qualified and appointed, then that'd be a progression.
Okay. I'm just going to add a note to myself to look this.
Jessica, if I could just add, I had the same comment as Leanna. The word qualified, I'm not sure is correct. I would prefer to say deemed eligible. And that would kind of imply that there's a vetting that occurs and done. So I just offer that suggestion.
Yeah.
Deemed eligible.
Eligible and
I
appointed.
can, I'll check with the city clerk's office as well and make sure that, you know, what is maybe there's some other reason why it's written that way. But I agree, it's kind of awkward.
Elizabeth, you have a comment. Did you want to share?
I was just looking at that. Is it being used as an adjective or a verb? Are they appointed and are also qualified, or are they qualified by someone? Like, yes, it's the same term as eligible, I guess, but that was just a thought I wrote because it was not sure.
And then also on that term of office, it looks like 3-year term with an option for a second term, but only if there aren't other candidates for the committee. That's what I'm to understand from this section, right?
I don't interpret it necessarily that way. I think you're appointed for a 3-year term unless you decide you don't want to continue, and then you have to be reconsidered for appointment. So you're appointed to your term, to your single 3-year term, and then you are in that until you decide otherwise. And it's not necessarily if there's other people that have applied that they have to be appointed rather than you. Does that make sense?
And it also says expiration of their terms, plural, not singular. That would imply 2 terms plus the additional time for somebody else to be appointed.
Mhm.
Well, in my experience, doing a lot of civic engagement work with my work, there are benefits to having a knowledge base of volunteers who are willing to perpetually serve. And, sometimes it prevents other degrees of civic engagement. I don't have a problem with 2 consecutive terms. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of knowledge and learning that comes. And if folks are willing to serve up to 6 years, that's awesome. I guess I would just have concern if we're saying, and after that, people can stay on until someone is appointed. I don't know. I guess it's a challenge because you've got rules, but it seems like we've had ample candidates so far. And then my only other comment was on the first section. Sorry, I'm throwing a lot at you. But in the very top where you mentioned micro mobility.
Micromobility.
Yeah, my only thought is maybe instead of the word issues, would be interests or something. Issue seems like obstacle rather than our intended outcome.
Elise,
Okay, yeah.
you're in the queue. Go ahead, Elise.
Just going back to what Leanna was talking about in the terms section. I'll let you finish your note first.
Oh, go ahead.
I understand what she's saying there, and I'm wondering if in that section, so there's 2 sentences that actually contain the until the member's successor is duly appointed and qualified. And so I wonder if it might be cleaned up if we move the members may serve up to 2 consecutive full terms directly after the members, the first half of the first sentence, members of the committee shall be appointed for 3-year terms, period. Members may serve up to 2 consecutive full terms, period. Then go into the vacancies line and then the line about beyond their expiration until appointed. That was just my thought process there.
Okay.
And
Let me.
Does that make it more clear for you, Leanne?
It does. I just put that note and misspelled your name in the chat. Sorry.
yes, Leanna approves. Thank you, Leanna. Randy and then Mike.
Yeah, we're blessed right now with having a continual flow of applications to this group and others, but in the past, there's been times when there hasn't been any applications. And so I think that we want to ensure by having someone be able to serve beyond their expiration of their term is that the group does not dwindle in size. We would like to have a full group, the full membership in the group. And if people have to leave when their term is expired and we don't have anybody else to take this spot, then the group could get small enough to be difficult for it to function. So I think that's why it's there.
Is anyone
Did I
else
capture
hearing
that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah, someone check your microphone for.
If everyone could mute, I'm not speaking.
Yeah, there we go. I think that someone got it. Oh, maybe not.
It's whoever's last digits are 6-1.
Mike, go ahead and take the floor while we try and sort this out.
Sure. If you go back up to Article 1.
Okay, hold on
Scroll.
one moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we're talking about in B, for the purpose of establishing a committee to advise, we have pedestrians. Do we want to put mobility challenged individuals too? Or is there another place in the city where ADA issues are addressed? Or is there any other committee, or are we the only one that's supporting accessibility for people with disabilities?
I think that is a really great suggestion that I feel silly for not thinking about before, but I do think that that would be a very good thing to put up front, and even in this section as well, if not already, which I don't see anything. So
I don't see anything at all. talk about
Yeah.
micromobility and bicycles and pedestrians, but not people in wheelchairs or other disabilities.
I second that, Mike. Thanks for bringing that up. Y'all, are there, before we move on, are there any other comments in tightening this up? We'll approve it in November. If not, folks, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Jessica, did you get everything?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Great feedback. Good eyes on this to improve a document. That's important work. So thank you. Next agenda item is a presentation on eco counters and 2023 bicycle and pedestrian counts. And Anna Sexton of the city of Asheville is going to present. Anna, the floor is yours. Thanks for being here.
Great. Good afternoon, Commission. Thanks for having me. Give me a second while I queue up my screen to share. All right. If this is not coming through, just holler. But my name is Anna Sexton. For folks who are tuning in, I'm a planner in the transportation department. And today I wanted to present to the Commission a couple of efforts in a combined way that our department is currently undertaking to collect data, which I think is really exciting, specifically data on bike and ped usage and volumes throughout the city. And so going to break it into two parts today. The first part is to talk about what Jack just referred to as eco counters in the agenda. Those are our permanent bike and ped counters that we've recently installed along greenways throughout the city. And then the second part is to recap the 2023 volunteer-led bike and ped counts that occur every September. And so to talk about the eco counters today, just to give you a little bit of project background, we were able to purchase these counters through a grant that the city received from the French Broad River MPO. They are manufactured by the company Eco Counter, which is based out of Canada, and it's a pretty well-known company in the industry. We have purchased and installed 7 of those counters along greenways throughout the city. The counters use infrared technology as well as buried wire loops under asphalt or other hard surface to detect movement and classify usage as either cyclists or pedestrians. They also can measure the direction of travel. And Eco Counter has a really robust website that's available to staff currently, where we can play around with the data that's being collected and create really cool visualizations, develop reports, and do analysis. Right now, that data isn't available to the public only because we'd have to pay for it. And we don't have that capability right now, or we haven't factored that in to have that be public facing. But what we're doing is we're working with our IT department to take that data that we're collecting and then develop a public facing dashboard so that folks can visit the city website and see that data come in real time. So why are we collecting it? Well, first, it is supported by several GAP plan action items. Action item 4.2 in the GAP plan recommends that the city complete projects in the identified high priority network to increase the number of people walking for transportation and recreation in Asheville. this helps us measure that. Item 8.6 says to build the case for active transportation funding and program expansion. We should expand the city's regular pedestrian counting systems and practices to include point-in-time counts as well as permanent counts. Having bike and ped data readily available is also key to the city filling out its walk-friendly community and bike-friendly community applications, which come around every several years. The city is currently designated at different levels for both of those designations, and they're a way for cities and communities to be recognized for their efforts to make their communities more bike and ped friendly. Also helps us to identify trends in multimodal activity. It can help shift the narrative away from people don't bike in Asheville, and having this data gives staff the ability to pursue creative funding sources and also bolsters grant applications that we submit. And so the 7 locations that we currently have, many of you have probably traveled right by them and have probably noticed them, or maybe you haven't. But I'll go sort of from the top of the screen on down. We've got counters installed along the Glens Creek Greenway. We have one that is at the roundabout on the UNCA campus. We have 2 on Reed Creek Greenway, sort of near the northern end and its intersection with Broadway, and then towards the southern end at Acala Street. We have 2 on the Wilma Dykeman Greenway, one up at what we're calling White Duck Taco, where it pops out right there, and then one along the cycle track and Greenway in the RAD. And then we also have 2 along the French Broad River West Greenway at either end. And we're looking to expand the number of counters that we have and the data that we collect as we continue to expand our Greenway network, so that when new greenways are constructed, we'll be able to incorporate additional counters and get that data. And as I was mentioning earlier about the capabilities that the EcoCounter website and dashboard give us, this is just some examples of the visualizations that we can pull, but this is to give you all a sense of what the data looks like for 2023 from the beginning of the year through the end of the 3rd quarter, so September 30th, the first 9 months of the year. You can see that the RAD cycle track and Greenway and then the French Broad River West at the dog park counters had the highest overall volumes of bicyclists and pedestrians. All of the other locations are relatively similar, with the Wilma Dykeman and White Duck Taco location having the lowest overall numbers across those 9 months. But if we wanted to dig in a little bit deeper, we can see what those numbers actually mean, or what those percentages translate into numbers wise. So over 9 months, you can see that 286,000 plus bicyclists and pedestrians crossed that counter on the RAD cycle track and Greenway. And then, all the way down to the Wilma Dykeman one, where you had around 90,000. And so that's a lot. It's a really cool way to see just how much usage our facilities are getting. And I think one thing that I want to offer to the commission is just considering what type of data or even reporting and the frequency you all may want to see. And if that's something that has, in conjunction with, the relative amount of staff time that would take, I think it's something that we would be happy to share with you at every meeting, a quarterly basis, something like that. This is also just another way to break down that data even further. We can see what the daily averages are for each site. We can see how those compare to our weekday averages versus our weekend averages, as well as the peak days of the week. So every single site with the exception of the Reed Creek at Ocala site, has peak usage on Fridays. The Reed Creek at Ocala site has peak usage on Mondays. This can also help us, not make definitive determinations, but kind of like key into, if folks are potentially using the facilities to commute for work or other purposes, or if it's largely recreational usage. This can also again break down pedestrian versus cyclist usage at each of the sites. So I pulled that for all of the sites, but the site on the left, French Broad River West at Craven Street, is the site that saw the highest percentage of cyclists across those first 9 months of 2023, whereas the Reed Creek at Ocala site had the lowest percentage of cyclists, just to kind of give you guys a comparison of where those numbers are and what the breakdown looks like, or the range looks like. And so our city dashboard, we're working with IT to develop it and tweak it. We hope to bring it online by the end of 2023. It's not going to look quite as fancy as what EcoCounter can give us, but right now this is sort of like the beta testing phase, where folks can see daily usages of pedestrians and cyclists. This is across a couple of weeks over the summer months. You can see that there are some zero numbers down here. So this is stuff that we still sort of need to hone in on and tweak, but it can give you a sense of how numbers sort of fluctuate between days of the week and different sites and pedestrians and cyclists. And then weekly as well. So this is from May to August, looking at each site and how the weekly usage varies between pedestrians and cyclists. So it's really cool. We're really excited about it. Want to now kind of segue into the volunteer bike ped counts, and then we can open things up. Oh yeah, I heard a hand go up.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead. I'm wondering, Anna, if it'd be okay to take questions on part one.
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, let's do that. Joe, you're first in the queue.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Great job. It's really exciting. I was curious. I haven't really noticed one of the counters, so bad on me. But you mentioned that it will enable us to have real-time reporting. I'm curious. What's the connection to the data collection? Is it wired? Is it microwave? Is it how's the data collected?
So yeah, the counters have, well, we have a couple of different kinds of counters, or ones that are either 2-loop or 4-loop. I'm getting into sort of the technical minutia of things, but they have the wires underground, and then there is something within that post that transmits the data to the cloud, and that's how we're getting it. Yeah.
It's cellular.
It is virtual. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Nice. Any other questions on part one, y'all? Elise?
Hi, thanks, Anna. I just had a question about the positioning of the counter at Wilma Dykeman and White Duck Taco, because I noticed it has the lowest numbers, and I'm wondering if that's like all the way at the very end where the greenway stops, it might be missing people that get there and realize there's nowhere else to go and then turn around.
Yeah, it's possible. So we did take care and intention in deciding where to position the counters. We wanted to get a sense of end to end sort of access points, rather than the middle where you may have people going back and forth a lot of different times. That I think right now is a potential indicator. Like you said, there's not a ton of facilities beyond White Duck Taco where folks may be accessing the Greenway other than coming down Hill Street, or if they've parked at White Duck. But as the Greenway continues to expand northward, I would be very curious to see how those numbers may change.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, that's totally valid.
Thanks, Elise. Bill Loftus.
Yeah, thanks. So love scoreboard. So this is great. I didn't completely follow what you were saying about, do we have a way to detect whether or not a user is commuting versus recreating? What can you elaborate on that a little bit, or is it still something we're trying to figure out, or where are we on that?
Sure. We don't have a way to determine that, but we could get more granular in looking at data and seeing the times of day, and how maybe commuting hours, how volumes change during that time versus other hours of the day. Or if we're seeing a lot of activity on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, or the majority of bike and ped volume during those days, we might be able to assume, and there are always limitations with doing that, that a lot of that activity is recreation based rather than commuting based, things like that. So there's not really a super sound way to make that distinction, but it can sort of help us look at trends that might skew one way or the other. Yeah, and exactly to what Maggie's point, many people work on the weekend.
If you don't mind to follow on, and we don't have to settle this, but I'm curious, the discussion we had last meeting was meaningful for me. Some of the votes we've seen appear meaningful. I'm increasingly interested in the fact that we are working for very different segments of our population in our activity. Greenways tend to be people of privilege, and transit tends to be people without. So I'm worried about us treating everybody equally. And my question is, do we have a way, maybe outside this venture, but anyway, that we try to measure multimodal usage across all modes other than car, just so we have a sense of where all Ashevilleans are behaving as it relates to multimodal across all of them? Do we have a way to do that?
Not right now, other than these point in time counts that we do every September, which are just a small sliver or capture just a very brief point in time of bike and ped usage and micromobility usage. So that's something that we incorporated for the first time this year, distinguishing if folks are on skateboards or one wheels or e-scooters, things like that. And, there's limitations to that as well. Like a lot of that relies on the turnout that we get for volunteers, staff time, and ability to manage the amount of data being collected across different sites and reported on. So where we're at with, to answer your question right now, that's sort of where we're at.
Randy and then Jessica, and then we'll move on to part 2. Randy, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So I just, on the transit side of that, we do have transit counts too. And I think every bus, right, has to record how many people are riding. So at least we do know those numbers. So Anna, on the counter, on the RAD counter, is it on the cycle track or the Greenway or both? Because
sorry, go ahead.
Just because, because on the other ones, it's, like even the White Duck Taco one there's bike lanes in the roadway. And then along on Broadway too, there's bike lanes next to the Greenway that runs along there too. So it's capturing only that specific stuff. So anyway, so I wonder on the RAD, and the RAD, is it capturing the cycle track or is it the Greenway or both, or what's?
It's capturing both. So we have it positioned and oriented, and that's one of the counters that has the additional loops that can be buried so that it can travel and extend the data collection across a wider footprint. And there are buried loops under the cycle track and under the greenway. So I don't know if it is capturing specifically numbers of usage on the cycle track versus numbers of usage on the greenway. But at that point, it's capturing at least that cross section for both, like in its entirety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and so we have to be very careful too what we're seeing there, because as a cyclist, I am on the cycle track there, but then I get off when the bike lanes appear. And so I will travel that same corridor. I'll be recorded on RAD, but not at the White Duck. Or on Broadway, if I'm leading a family ride or something, I'll use the Greenway. But otherwise, I'm always on Broadway. So we're capturing different data, different uses on different parts of these. So it's not, we're not always comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges. It's different. So it's just another consideration that we should be aware of when we're looking at the data.
Good point, Randy.
Definitely. Yeah, there are certainly a lot of limitations to how this data is collected and how we can choose to analyze it. And at the same time, I think it shows and demonstrates that when there are dedicated facilities built for folks, they get a lot of use.
Folks, I want to keep our eye on time. Jessica, and then we'll wrap up with a comment from Jared. Jessica, floor is yours.
Yeah, just real quick on kind of to go back to what Bill was asking. And, you know, unfortunately, it's like data collection is never perfect and enough. The only thing that I can think of that is data that we get that talks to how people commute, like what their commute source is or their mode that they use for commuting is a census, and it's another source of data that we look at, but it's really like an effort at just cobbling everything together more or less. So there is a commute to work part of the census that comes out every 10 years. And then the other thing is that the city participates in the national, I think it's called the National Community Survey. And I think there's some transportation information that's asked in that, and that's a statistical survey that I think we should be getting that. That happens every 3 years, I believe. And CAPE is the department that runs it, and it does include some transportation information. And I think that we should be getting that data this year. So, good question.
Jared, floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'll try to be quick. Just had a couple of comments that I appreciated from Bill and Randy and others talking about the way the tool could be used potentially as forward-looking. And I don't know about what the cost of a counter is or what funding or grant opportunities there may be, but I also saw a note in the presentation that talked about changing the perspective that people have that Asheville is not like a biking city. So I don't know if it's possible for folks to think about it or not, but the way the College and Patton project is going to shift downtown, and the way maybe it's an opportunity to capture the change in the way the downtown area is being used, like before and then after that project. Maybe that could be an opportunity to show folks that, you know, maybe bikes enter those areas where they feel safer with more frequency. And that would also tie into the transportation component to potentially use those counters where maybe another road diet's looking to be utilized, particularly with regards to neighborhoods that, like the Southside neighborhood or something like that, that doesn't necessarily have a lot of access to bike lanes and greenways. So just kind of a thought.
Thanks, Jared. Anna, back to you for part 2. Great comments, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, looking forward to continuing this conversation at future meetings and sharing data with you. So The second piece of our efforts in collecting bike and ped data throughout the city pertains to the 2023 volunteer bike ped counts that were recently completed. These are counts that have been done, to my knowledge, since at least 2009. And the city has leaned heavily on the bike ped task force in the past to recruit and manage volunteers and collect and analyze that data. This is the first year that the city is taking the lead on those tasks. And these counts are counts that they happen during the second week of September every year. They happen in 2-hour shifts that folks sign up for, either in the evening on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of that week from 5 to 7, or in the morning on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of that week from 7 to 9, or on Saturdays from 9 to 11. And these are predetermined sites. They encompass an intersection where folks count the number of bicyclists and pedestrians navigating through that intersection. And then they just give us, additional sort of data and insight into how things may be changing from year to year. So some key takeaways and highlights from the counts this year are that for pedestrians, we do have volunteers assume a bicyclist or pedestrian's gender, either as male or female, or this year was the first year that we included unknown as an option. But the reason that we do that is that it can offer or be an indicator or serve as a proxy to show or assume how safe people feel walking or biking in an area, because there is research and studies out there that show that facilities that are perceived safe by individuals of all ages and abilities tend to have gender splits closer to 50-50. That is the case for our overall counts this year related to pedestrians. But for bicyclists, we saw that around 25% counted this year were female versus around 75% male. It's important to note the weather. We do ask folks to notate that on their count forms. This year, the weather was generally pleasant across all days, warm, comfortable. A few count sites reported rain that ended prior to their evening shift on Tuesday. I think it's also important to highlight that we're still continuing to understand how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted travel patterns. I think that we'll still be looking at that for several years out. I mentioned earlier, this is the first year that specific micromobility devices were counted. Folks were also asked to capture e-bike usage if they could. Not everybody did, and that's okay. However, in total, we had folks record 119 e-bikes overall that were counted, and that accounts for 14% of all of the bikes that were counted during the counts. It's probably an underrepresentation since not all locations captured that usage. And then the permanent counters that we just talked about have replaced locations along greenways where volunteers counted in previous years. So summary of the volunteers that we had this year, we had 39 volunteers count across 26 sites. Those count locations are in the image on the right side of the slide, where you can see purple is where we've had data come in previous years, and then folks counted again this year. The sort of coral color is our new locations that we added. Nearly half of our volunteers this year, so 19 of the 39 were first-time volunteers, which I think is really wonderful. I want to give a shout out to Leanna, Kenny, and Kristen who Leanna and Kenny are here. They also serve on the Greenway Committee or Active Transportation Committee. They helped to really hone in and get the word out about the opportunity. Those coral sites in the map account for 7 new locations, and we were also able to add different shifts to the sites. So always try to have an evening shift if possible. And then if we're also able to, we can add a weekday morning or a Saturday shift based on turnout. So our 2023 results in summary, this is how data has been presented in the past. We have a gender breakdown of bicyclists, gender breakdown of pedestrians, and then helmet usage amongst bicyclists. So as I mentioned, we had about 25% of the bicyclists counted were female, as opposed to 73% male, 2% unknown. And then 85% of bicyclists were wearing helmets, which is consistent with previous years. I think maybe a little bit lower, but that usually like vacillates a couple percentage points. The gender breakdown of pedestrians, that was much closer to 50-50. Wanted to look at the mode split this year. I'm not sure if this is something that has been done in the past, but I thought it was really interesting to see that out of all the folks counted, what was the percentage of bicyclists versus pedestrians versus micromobility users. And so based on how you look at data, you can tell different things or tell a different story, but you can see that 2020 and 2021 had, last year had the highest number of bicyclists, or highest percentage of bicyclists across the total number of folks counted. This year we had about 11% of folks were on bikes, 88% were pedestrians, and then 1% micromobility. And then below that, the micromobility tally across all sites. So in total, 23 skateboards counted, 28 e-scooters, 27 one-wheels, 2 folks on roller skates. 4-year trends. I've also included, just want to kind of go back a little bit, in the meeting agenda packet or the materials packet, the full report is in there for commission members and the general public to review. This is really sort of the Cliff Notes version. That comprehensive report has all of the count sites that were counted this year. But what I'm including here today are all of the count sites where numbers were gathered for this year, but also they were gathered in previous years dating back to 2020, so that you could see trends from year to year. And so some of the sites ticked upward, some of them down. And it's also, I think, important to keep in mind that the numbers are relatively small from site to site. So just, a couple or a change in 5 or 10 bicyclists really swings the pendulum one way or the other. Same with pedestrians here. Most of the sites, there was a decrease between 2023 and going back to 2022 of pedestrians counted at the sites, except for, this second one, College Street and Oak Street, that is supposed to be a red number, but Chestnut and Broadway saw an increase, and so did Haywood and Robert Street. And then just want to acknowledge everyone involved in the effort. It being the first time that staff took the lead on this, it's a lot of work. And also just want to really acknowledge that everybody that got out there and volunteered this year, but also previous years to help us build a data set. Want to acknowledge the Flying Bike that offered a membership to a randomly selected volunteer. I think that was just a great incentive, and thank you for folks who volunteering their time. Thanks to the Greenway Committee, the subcommittee that was formed to help me plan, the Bike Ped Task Force for all of the work that they've done over the years, and then of course, Multimodal Transportation Commission, as well as local organizations that helped us spread the word about the opportunity.
Thanks, Anna, for that presentation. And I'm going to open the floor to questions. I do want to say I'd like to allocate about 10 minutes to discussion. If we need a little bit more, we'll do it. But I want to make sure we get to our next agenda item before we have to break. So be efficient with your questions if you can. So we'll open the floor. Any questions, folks? Lisa and Randy.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that this is the second year that I volunteered and I have a great time doing it. And if you haven't done it before, I highly recommend it.
I did notice there were 2 roller skaters. So either you got counted twice or someone else.
That wasn't me, but I did see a
Okay.
rollerblader on my shift.
Okay, good. All right, fair enough. Randy, then Jared.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Till Dosey, who was a math professor at UCA and led this effort for many, many, many years with the bike ped task force and set up the whole thing. So, you know, we don't want to ever negate his all his hard work to make this happen. And then for Anna to pick it up too, because she quickly found out that it was a labor of love for Till and why he's not doing it anymore. So, but yeah, it's so hard because data collection like this is so imprecise, but yet so needed, you know? So it's like we just don't, getting data, even with the counters. So if you use the counters instead of people at some of these locations, that changes everything too. They can't say male, female, or the helmet, or just different things too. But at the same time is that we should never give up. You know, like the census data that Jessica mentioned, I believe it's like for a specific week in March, you know, and in Chicago, that was always a rainy time. And so of course nobody's using, you know, very few people are using alternative transportation then outside in bad weather. So data is just hard to deal with, but if we don't try, then we don't have much to work with. And it's an effort that as frustrating as it is sometimes, or as lacking as we say sometimes it is in terms of getting complete data, it's still worth the effort. It's still worth having and trying to do better each year. But I'm just glad that we continue to do this, because it was something that easily could have gotten lost, you know, with bike peds transitioning and stuff too, but still really important, as imprecise as it still might be.
Yeah, agreed, Randy. The data is really important. Jared.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking on Randy, and what I hear from public sentiment is that they're going off their own qualitative data. Like, I was driving down Merriman and didn't see a cyclist, therefore there are no cyclists. And do we have like a hard cost on what a counting location costs to procure and then maintain?
For the permanent counters?
Yes.
Yeah, so the hardware itself, I think, is around $4,000 to $5,000 with like an increase each year because of cost inflation. But then, you know, factoring in maintenance, so replacing batteries every so often. Elise acknowledged charging monthly. I think it's like an annual fee for the data transmission and having access to the Eco Counter dashboard site. Unfortunately, the counters that we have on the Greenway are not going to function correctly as counters that could count in bike lanes. And the reason why is that they will also count cars, and they will not distinguish cars from other user types. There are other eco counter products out there, like bike tubes and other other pieces of equipment for various types of needs. That's something that we have explored as staff there, and you know, comes with a host of pros and cons. But I think I just want to acknowledge in here, like, yes, we recognize the importance of finding ways to do pre and post data collection on some of these projects, and also continuing to collect data and where some of these new facilities have gone into place.
So on that one part there, you got close to mentioning it, but the maintenance cost, or the like, so what is that?
Maintenance is mostly just battery replacement and keeping.
I just mean the dollar figure.
Oh, dollar figure. Oh, I'm sorry. I think the batteries and other equipment are going to cost around $300 or $400. I have all of that information.
It's okay. I just wanted a kind of a back of the napkin, because I do think there would be appetite from certain nonprofits or grant opportunities to start identifying, like you said, maybe sidewalks that folks are actively using from certain communities right now that don't have greenway access, or, they're walking in food deserts in particular. Because I'm right downtown, I see this a lot. Like some of those communities that don't always get a lot of representation, they're walking on sidewalks. And I know one in particular last night was quoted as saying, I've never seen a car funeral, but I see people funerals from cars. And I think it's important to remember that maybe those counters could be used on sidewalks towards where we would like greenways and other, pathways, multimodal pathways to go.
Joe Kessler.
Yeah, Anna, great job. And kind of jumping on Elise's comment, I was a volunteer and really loved it. What I really found most satisfying was all the questions I got from pedestrians walking by or people in a car wanting to know what I was doing sitting on the corner. And it was just a great opportunity to essentially show the flag. And I look forward to further opportunities. Thanks.
Anna, what's your reaction to the decline in cycling numbers, the aggregate number?
I don't know. I think it's it could be so many different things. It could be, I'm curious to hear if anybody else has any takes on it. I think, like I said, coming out of COVID, seeing some of those sites like an uptick during 2020 and 2021, and then maybe kind of going back to the numbers that you're seeing prior to the pandemic. Also, acknowledging limitations to the data, how, I mentioned that the numbers relatively are small. So any changes in those numbers is really going to, percentage wise, look like a large increase or decrease. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I realize there's some margin of error, and we'll have to see if there's a trend. Mike, did you have your hand up or are you down?
I was just going to say that probably during the last 3 years during COVID, there was more people out there biking and walking just because they were going less to other activities and stuff. A lot of people were getting outside for the first time, buying bikes, and just getting more involved. And so there probably was an uptick for the 2021 and 22, just because people were out there more for the first time.
Joe Barker.
Yeah, something I was kind of pondering is you mentioned that the gender split on biking could indicate safety concerns, and it was 3-to-1 male female. So, I mean, we all can tell that traffic's getting worse in Asheville by the day. More people are moving here. So I'm wondering if bicyclists are feeling like there's more cars on the road, there's more congestion. Getting to and from designated bike lanes in Asheville, you have to be in the roadway lanes a lot. So I'm wondering if there's concern about additional traffic as the city grows.
From the staff perspective?
No. I'm saying from the public perspective. Sorry. Like people who would have biked years ago when there was less people driving around Asheville. Now they're like, oh gosh, the traffic's crazy. There's congestion. I don't want to get in that on a bike,
Yeah, I think that's a valid.
Yeah.
It could be. There's not anything that we've done to sort of capture that. But
yeah, it's hard. It would be hard. It would be hard to capture that. It's almost like trying to capture an essence or something.
Yeah. All right, folks, we'll take one more question. Elise.
I just wanted to know if there was any like year over year trending with the gender split of bicyclists. Like, is the 3-to-1 a higher male proportion than last year or less?
There is that information. Let me bear with me here just a second. I think I can pull it up for you. Okay, yeah, I'm going to share my screen again. This final report has all sorts of nuggets in it, and things might be a little buried, but so let's see, right here. 2023, 25% of bicyclists were counted as female. Last year, there were 31%. In 2021, it was 26%. In 2020, is 24%. In 2019, it was 30%. So it's all over the place. It's easy to get lost in like the details too. Like I haven't gone in and looked at site by site. I'm not sure how helpful that would be other than to just like satisfy my like nerdy curiosity. But yeah, there's it fluctuates and it's not all that different from years past.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. This was really helpful. I think it's great to have some data for us to look at. All right, folks, next agenda item, I present to you Leanna and Joseph Chesler to discuss commission membership survey. And if y'all would give just a little bit of a background and then explain what you have.
Sure. It's probably been at least a year that we had the good fortune of reviewing some applications of interest from our fellow citizens for this commission. And, I think we had a plethora of really amazing candidates and we're having trouble making decisions. And I think kind of are often weighing the balance of folks who recreate in many different ways and appreciate multimodal transportation options and might bring a variety of different professional backgrounds and or be business owners or anything else. And so I had offered at the time, and Joe offered to support the project, was to see if we could assess where we are as a commission so that we understand our own capacity and we could work to fill in gaps to better represent people who are underrepresented on our current roster. So the goal of the survey was largely for us to know what might benefit our group as a reflection of the city. So for instance, if we are overrepresented in transportation planners, not that we are Joseph Parker or but we should be aware of that, right? Like with our own lens and our own bias around what kind of preference we might choose for this commission. And so I'm hoping that the outcomes that we'll share will help us look at applications where we can prioritize people that might have some of the things we might be missing. So with that, Jessica, I'm not sure if you are able to share, or maybe I'm able to share. Let's see what this is. Share window.
I can share.
That would be so great.
The president, wait. Yeah,
yes.
Presentation.
Yep.
Right?
And it's just a PDF and it was in the packet. I'm gonna just call attention to a couple quick things and then maybe we could have a discussion about that.
Jessica? Okay.
Thank you. So on page 1, I think the most relevant piece of information is that we do tend to look overrepresented here on the west side of Asheville, followed by the north side. So we could probably do a better job in that arena. That is part of the city's application process. It does ask, what part of the city do you live in? So that might be something that we could consider so that we can hear perspectives from other places. And then at the top of page 2, this is looking at the background and experience that we bring as a current makeup of our group. And so I'll just point out a couple things that are standouts to me. None of our members use public transit or a bus regularly, or don't own a car for whatever reason. And then let's see, on the 70% of our members, I did find a typo in my transcription here. It says I use public transit or bus rarely. It should say 10 or fewer times per month. But I think that that's the corollary to the none of our members statistic. Like, we are using public transit, but it's rarely, right? So 70% of us use it, but it's not super common. So good thing to be aware of.
And very few for commuting.
Correct.
In that category, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. And very few for the commuting. So, I think we are fairly well distributed. Obviously we've got many of us walking, biking, or rolling for recreation, which is wonderful. If anything, we might be overweighted in the category of folks who, love to spend time outside doing things with their bodies. But happy to discuss this. I think the next question, the follow-on to this was, does it make sense to make sure that our committee is well represented across a variety of backgrounds and experiences? And everybody said, yes, it sure does. That's kind of the springboard to the discussion. I think when I look at it, it does seem that we could maybe be more intentional about our recruitment where we know we have known gaps. And then I guess for the rest of this, we don't have to necessarily scroll through. There's details in topics of interest that Multimodal Commission members had for topics of discussion, but I'd rather us not get mired in that right now. That was more like information gathering and how that might serve our new chair, Jack, more than anything else. But it's also, I didn't want to hold it back because I know what you contributed to that discussion through the form. So I think with that, we'll just see if there are questions about the representation of this group and thinking about future membership. Thank you for the share, Jessica.
Yeah, Randy, why don't you take the floor?
Yeah, this is always a tough thing. So thank you, Leanna, for doing this and gathering information, because it's important to know where we are before we can know where we want to go. And I think that ideally we'd like to have a BIPOC transit user that commutes on a regular basis, but that person has a hard time making meetings at times that we have them either now in the daytime, which might be work time, or in the evening, which might be time that they're doing other things too. So this type of group tends to have a natural tendency towards people who have more time flexibility, who have more financial security, more things that'll do it too. So that sometimes that when we can identify the type of member that we think would really add a lot to our discussion, add a lot to the perspective that we have that we need to lack. But that's exactly the kind of person that has trouble making this kind of meeting. So I think we should think about how we diversify the group in terms of getting those perspectives, but then also how do we get that perspective without having to have that person be on our membership, like to be a member of the commission, but how do we get that person's input? And that's a different question, but also it gives us the same type of information we'd like to have. So it's just something else to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I think, there's some false equivalencies maybe in what you present, that folks might not be able to join at the right time, or might not have, or that someone is both a person of color and a transit user 100%. So I think there might be more assumptions there that we could challenge. And we are, you rightly point out, a really white group, and it would be really great to address that, particularly with if there's a means. I think more than anything, understanding how we can bring more diverse perspectives. Randy, you're absolutely right. We need to figure out how to do a better job of that and be clear about how we create representation for that and what time of day works best for folks. I mean, I have left volunteer boards that I served on because I requested as a working professional to make it at a time when in the evenings that would make it easier for me to participate, and it wasn't honored. So you're right. We have to figure out what we can do collectively to flex to make it a more available role for folks too, as we learn about what that might be.
Yeah. Maggie, you do you have a comment? I saw your hand up for a moment there.
Anna kind of covered some of the things I was thinking.
Okay. Other comments? Jessica, your hand is up. Take it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, and kind of going to the next item about the retreat. I think one thing we could do, and maybe it's like the first half of the retreat. I don't know, just some thoughts coming in, but the city, all city departments are writing a equity plan. So we have a transportation equity plan that is in draft form right now, but it's very, it's really like, it's not long. It's basically what do we think that we can reasonably do that would have a big impact in trying to get more participation and more information out. And so what we could do is, even though it hasn't been looked at and adopted yet by anybody, we could bring that to the and talk about that at the retreat, because I think some of the strategies and action items that we identified for our own internal staff could be something that could be useful, or it's something that MMTC members could even look at as opportunity for themselves and as the group. I'll just throw out an example. One of the things we've been talking about is like trying to have a staff person attend every neighborhood meeting quarterly. So, trying to start to build relationships and have more of a presence by attending these meetings more regularly in legacy neighborhoods. Stuff like that. Another thing we've talked about is like, should we have multimodal commission meetings occasionally in community centers? So there's things like that are not necessarily, they might not necessarily mean that you have increased the diversity on the multimodal. It might lead to that, but it is also a way to try to have more involvement and be more present. We also can try to fit in the equity training on that day as well, and maybe have a dedicated conversation, or a dedicated and in-depth conversation to how we need to try to do better, do some different things.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's a good, authentic start to a conversation. It's a hard one to have, and I think it's tricky to find the right strategy. So I'm grateful that we're talking about it. Leanna, what's the next step in terms of, I know that eventually we'll be looking at applications if someone should leave the committee. So I think there's a next step in sort of a better process for us. It's so hard when we're in a meeting, kind of trying to sort through 10 applications. And what do you propose for that? Will be another proposal for us to look at for a process?
Well, I think we can, if we all agree from this meeting, that it would be good to identify if any candidates rely heavily on public transit or don't own a car, or, represent a city part of the city that is underrepresented currently on our roster, then those might be places to start, right? Like we've already identified that those are places where we might have, where we do have deficiencies, right? In terms of like a whole. So if we agree that those are places to start, that might narrow the field to make the discussion of the remaining candidates a little bit easier. And then it would be a matter of kind of keeping the the information up to date so that when we make future decisions, we have it available. That's the suggestion I have at this point. And I think part and parcel, the only other piece that I think is a factor is the process by which folks submit their applications to the city and the timeline under which we have to review them. So sometimes they're and available, and then whether or not people are ready is I think of interest to how we might be more responsive to what citizen interest is, if that makes sense. Like if we know we've got openings and we found people who had specific interest in this, could we ask them to, apply? Could we recruit people? Is that even feasible? Yeah. Right? Like, and if we get their interest, rather than having an application languish, I think this is my point, before it gets around to being reviewed, like, I think it's that sequencing piece that I think I don't have a clear picture of.
Yeah.
So maybe it's part and parcel. I think some of that might ease some of the ways.
Yeah. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Leanna and Joe. This is great stuff, because I know we've struggled when we are trying to pick somebody amongst 10. As I was listening to it, though, it's awful mentally, I made a big abrupt shift in my reaction, because what I'd like us to do also in the candidate process is, I wish we would find qualitative ways in which to make judgments about what type of a person that might be on commission. I get a little worried if we end up with this matrix that says we've got all these rows. It's age, it's where you live, it's what color your skin is, it's what your income is. If we fill in those and just make that matrix complete, we're missing a lot of the meat of who a candidate possibly can be. And so I want to make sure we go beyond the sort of these profiles in deeper, if at all possible.
Yeah, I think specifically what we're talking about, Bill, is not looking at age, race, we're not doing that as part of this process. I think what we're preferencing is either the lived experience or the knowledge that people are bringing, right? And where they lived, which is also part of that lived experience. So at this point, Bill, I think concerns that you're raising around, age, gender, race or ethnicity is not something, A, that we have the information about in the first place on the application, and B, something that we could then factor into any kind of decision making. Does that help?
Yeah, I just wanted, it's more than data points is what I'm saying. I think the idea about a lived experience is tremendous. If there's a way we could get some HR person to plug in here and figure out I know when I was with a firm, they had a great thing about experiential reviews. I mean, the whole hiring process was around, tell me about your experiences. What did you do? What things?
I think we lost you, Bill.
We lost Bill.
Yeah. Joe, go ahead for our last comment. Bill, you broke up there. Back to you, Bill.
I'm sorry. I'm in and out of the internet today for some reason.
Okay. No, you're good.
All I'm saying is that just the pure data points, I'd like to see if we can find a way to go beyond that if possible through experientials. And maybe past experientials. Maybe we need a interview. I don't know what it is, but I'd like to go beyond just the data points in this process. I think the process is great. I'm glad you guys are taking the lead on it, and I thank you for all that effort. It's great stuff. I'm just I'm just saying I'd like to go beyond just pure data points in terms of how we end up going forward. That's all I'm saying.
Joe, last comment, then we'll move on to our last agenda item and wrap up the meeting. Go ahead, Joe Barker.
Yeah, I was, with what Bill's saying, I don't know if I love the idea of like a really formal interview, but maybe an invitation for applicants to come participate in some meetings and give some input and just kind of get a feel for what this is actually about. And then that'll naturally lead to conversations about their lived experience, a more casual kind of introduction to the commission maybe than a formal interview.
Thanks, Joe. And thanks, Leanna and Joe Chesler. I think this is a good start to the conversation, and I found the data to be really interesting. We'll keep on discussing this and fine-tuning it and see where we go. So thanks for everyone, your work on that. Just very briefly, the next agenda item is to discuss the annual retreat. And just as a reminder, it's scheduled for January 19th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then a second round on February 3rd, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I know one of those is a Friday and one is a Saturday. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but make sure you mark your dates, and we will sort of crowdsource the who, the what, the where, and building that agenda collectively. I think there's a lot of ideas already that I'm sure we can coalesce around. So enough said on that. We'll have a discussion perhaps in November or beginning to build that agenda and the logistics of that day. It will be in person both of those days. Does anyone have any questions about the agenda before we wrap up the meeting? Unless there are any objections, I now adjourn the meeting.
Thanks all.